just shooting this video at the risk of sounding a little bit repetitious to outline and summarize rules for lifelong healthy hormones and pelvic floor care. So first of all, we always use the neck whenever we cough, sneeze, or lift. So this is where we actually work with the reflexive action of drawing into a pelvic floor contraction before or at the point of a cough, a sneeze, or a strong intra-abdominal pressure event. And this is actually one time that we can make sure that we're reducing risk factors and tensile pressures on a muscle group that is very vulnerable during those high abdominal pressure events. Secondly, always be mindful of what a tall posture looks like and feels like in your own body. Because when we have a tall posture where the crown of the head, and actually the old deportment rule of balancing the apple on the head or the book on the head, that particular strategy alone in daily life will lift a lot of pressure away from the abdominal and pelvic organs. Very supportive for our digestion, but also very supportive for not actually putting a lot of downward pressure into the lower half of the torso. And adopting that long, tall posture will also give us the opportunity to keep lifelong good spinal health, which is really essential for the idea and the concept of us supporting a pelvic breath. We also want to be careful with asymmetric postures. So if we constantly carry our shopping on one side, we're constantly hitching our toddler up on the hip on one side, then that is also going to set us up for sacroiliac joint issues, possibly pelvic asymmetries, which affects the pelvic floor muscle integrity, and also creates a little bit of can create a stress response in the body. So change of inflammatory diet is another really good tip. So if we make sure we get good prebiotic and probiotic qualities in our gut health, and we don't feed the bad bacteria, the bad juju with sugars, highly refined foods, saturated fats, and food that is very processed, then we are going to have good gut health. And good gut health is essential for good, healthy vagus nerve functioning, good, healthy hormone functioning, and great pelvic health as well, because pelvic health and gut health go hand in hand. So the other thing about hormones is as we reach menopause and in the perimenopausal period, our ovaries are winding up estrogen production. Our liver is going to take over from that estrogen production. So if we load our liver up with lots of processed foods and ingredients that are difficult to digest, then the liver cannot do the job of really working through that estrogen job that it now has. So we will find we have greater levels of sensitivity to food as we approach menopause quite often because of this. And the liver loves a good cleanse with high fiber rich food, lots of fruit and veggies. It's a really, really important organ for us to feed with a lot of good hydration from water-rich fruits and vegetables, and also fiber-rich foods like whole grain foods and whole grain and the whole fruit and veg rather than just parts of it. So this also then gives us that fiber that reduces constipation, which is absolutely essential for a healthy pelvic floor. And of course, with hydration, there is a bit of speculation about how much fluid is, enough, but basically 2 litre mark on average isn't a bad quantity of fluid per day, but that can include things other than water. And in some cases, actually, the bladder is not going to benefit from having too much fluid. So in some cases, we might need to limit fluid to 1.5 litres a day so that we can get in control of some issues around urinary urgency and frequency, high levels of frequency. Another rule is that we learn the transverse abdominis and pelvic floor muscle connection. So whenever we engage in an intra-abdominal event with transversus abdominis, we just naturally symbiotically draw pubococcygeus levator ani into a contraction at the same time. And that is a lifelong practice. Not peeing in the shower is a good rule to stick to if your bladder tends to be a bit sensitive. We don't need the trigger of water to set us off into a urinary urgency or frequency event. So getting out of that habit is good. Don't blow your nose while you're sitting on the toilet, because that can actually create a downward bearing activity in the pelvic floor, whereas we want our elimination of both urine and feces to be completely passive and relaxed in the pelvic floor. And then really reducing heavy loads on the pelvis. So don't lift really heavy loads over and over. Get yourself out of heavy laboring work if you are showing signs of pelvic floor weakness, and don't do lots of high impact sports on the pelvic floor until you've built up good core levels of strength. And then, of course, for happy hormones, we need to really balance the yang with the yin. And the yang is those really driving hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. It's the hormones that move us into the doingness of life, and society is very set up for that. And the yin hormones are the progesterone and the estrogen and the thyroid hormones that actually stop and support us to feel integrated and relaxed and calm, but open and alert. And so how do we make sure this balance between yin and yang is achieved? Well, we look at the nervous system and whether the nervous system is in a constant state of fight or flight, which is yang, or too much yin, which is a very lethargic, passive, but a bit sluggish place for us to be resting. And we want to find a middle path where we're in our ventral vagus nerve response, which is a response that is something we often feel when we're sitting at a table with a beautiful meal in front of us, talking with friends that we love, feeling safe. That's a great example of a good nervous system state that supports happy, healthy, balanced hormones. So we have to get a little bit vigilant about whether we're going into fight or flight response, or whether we're going into that dorsal vagus nerve response, which is more of a dissociated freeze response, and really assess that in ourselves. And if we're too elated and anxious, we don't necessarily need to do lots of chest opening postures. We can actually come into some more supported postures. And if we are going to do chest opening postures, we'd want to support ourselves with the bolster rather than do them freestyle. And then, of course, tailoring our practice to our nervous system. So making sure that we're not fighting fire with fire, so that when we're in a really high yang situation, we're not actually going into our practice and burning our adrenals out and creating more fire or tapas for that practice. And we're holding ourselves back into that more restorative, feminine and reclined approach when that's the case for us. Or alternatively, if we're really sluggish and slow and lethargic and all we feel like doing is rest and restore, sometimes that's great, but sometimes we need to add the tapas, a bit of fire and discipline, and actually push through a little bit of the yang style practices like sun breaths and our sun salutes, because these are the ones that actually start to lift us metabolically when we're feeling sluggish. So those are some rules for healthy hormones and pelvic care. I know we've covered them all before, but it doesn't hurt to reinforce them again. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye bye.